Welcome to the December 7th Litchfield Budget Committee meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and tonight we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Any review or additions to tonight's agenda? I do have a couple that I'm going to add two items. The first, before we start school business, just chairman comments. And then I'll put this under member input new business, discussion of our calendar for the remainder of the season. So those are the two items to add for tonight. Seeing nothing else, I will open it up for public input. Any members of the public? Welcome to come up and please state your name and address.
Good evening. Ronald Linus, and appreciate the opportunity to come before you.
Thank you.
As many of you recall, I was here last week and brought questions, and subsequent to that, attended the, was it the Facilities Improvement
School Facilities
Committee meeting yesterday. Lose track of time. And so I revised the questions, and I want to just present them here. I'm just going to read them, and I present them to the Budget Committee, and have also presented them to the School Committee, and really I won't add any further comment to them unless there's a question on them, because I really would expect to defer to the school committee to answer the majority of these. But I thought I would appreciate it, the opportunity to just read them based on what has been presented since last week.
Okay.
From Ronald Blanus, 15 Riverview Circle, Litchfield, to Litchfield School District and Budget Committee. Questions or comments? Regarding the proposed elementary school on the existing Griffith Memorial site, I'd like to have the following questions, comments answered directly or incorporated into the elementary school evaluation process and revealed at subsequent public meetings. These questions have been revised to reflect updated information noted below. Question 1. In the 12/06/23 Facilities Improvement Committee meeting, FIC meeting, it was presented that the projected cost for the new replacement school is now $44.09 million, and this cost does not include the demolition of the existing GMS building. Demolition of GMS must be included in the project cost, as it is a cost to the taxpayer and is a direct result of implementing the replacement project. Should the town decide to retain a portion of the building for other public use, then that needs to be pursued as a standalone project of the town. Based on what I heard at the meeting, it was agreed that demolition costs will be added to the replacement project costs. Item 2, it was noted that at the FIC meeting that the estimate does include all costs including required furniture, electronic items, kitchen equipment, and other items to open and maintain school services for the replacement building. At the FIC meeting, an order of magnitude cost for the replacement building was presented. The cost is apparently in current dollars. The estimate needs to be inflated to reflect projected contract award date. Item B of the same question. The contingency costs appear to be unrealistically optimistic given the level of design, and I would suggest even substantially low even if the project had been just awarded. Item 4. The most recent cost estimate for the current CIP found on the school website to renovate the existing facility was just over $20 million. There has been no level of design that identifies what this option would include. It is requested that the consultant be directed to create best options for rehabilitation projects of $15 million, $20 million, or $30 million to allow reasonable comparison of available options. It is noted that it is likely that rehabilitation projects will not result in a building project that will qualify for State A. but it will result in substantial improvements to the existing facility. A specific item to consider is that the existing gymnasium has been presented as being able to be retained and used by the town. Thus, the gym certainly is a facility element that needs minimal improvements. It has been noted that the size of the present gym does not meet the state requirements required for consideration of state aid. However, the total reduction in project costs by reusing the existing gym will likely greatly exceed the amount of any state aid. But this conclusion cannot definitely be answered without having designs for rehabilitation progress to the same level of design as the project plans for the replacement facility. As such, it's impossible to determine which options provide the best option for taxpayers while addressing the major issues with the existing facility. Specifically, the consultant should be tasked with designing best projects that could be built for $15, $20 million, or $30 million. Item 5. It was noted at the FIC meeting that potential state aid is hoped to be between $5 to $7 million. It was also noted that other school districts would have to defer their current plans for Litchfield to be in a position for this money. Since this money is greatly dependent on factors that will not be known at the time of the anticipated warrant vote, this cost reduction for the replacement building must be removed from the projected cost. If it is not, then the project could immediately be in deficit by the assumed projected state aid amount of $7 million. The presentation of a potential warrant article can include discussion of the amount of the bond that will be reduced if the projected savings is realized by the school board. Item 6, at a recent meeting, it was noted that the projected bond rate for the project was estimated to be 4.75%. With the Federal Reserve effort to lower inflation seeming to be working, it is fair to assume that financing costs will come down considerably in the next 1 to 2 years. It is reasonable to expect the bond rates could come down to 2.5%. The difference between the total cost of these rates for a $44.09 million bond for 20 years is $12,309,082. Thus, the cost could be cheaper if we wait for rates to come down, even if we are not able to get the projected $7 million state aid. Additionally, inflation is anticipated to drop sufficiently over the next 1 to 2 years. Thus, there should not be any rush to action until all options are fully analyzed. Also, in comparing the new to the rehabilitation option, the total cost, including finance costs, must be factored in. For comparison, the cost of a $20 million project versus a $40.09 million project financed for 20 years at 4.75% is $31,018,734 versus a cost of $68,380,799 for a difference of $37,362,065. Please note that this does not include the added cost of demolishing Griffin School, as it is not part of the $44.09 million project cost. As it is not included in the new build cost, then the cost differential between the new and the renovated will be even greater. Item 8. The cost comparison of the options do need to include assessments of other costs, including future maintenance, energy costs, and human resources. This cost comparison needs to be made at a level of detail that can be fully understood and compared. To do this, all options, as requested, must be developed to the same level of engineering design. Failure to do this will result in the same confusion as occurred while attempting to understand the life cycle cost comparison matrix shown below that was presented in the April 7, 2022 feasibility study. This must be done even if it disrupts the ability to present a warrant article for this year. And item 9. What is the projection annual increase in both the new build and renovation options for a home value at $500,000 using the current mill rates? In short, per my engineering and economics classes, all costs must be added to each option, and each option developed to a level, an equal level, to present a true and complete picture of the elementary school project based on a realistic cost-benefit analysis. I am requesting the true cost of all projects, options be fully vetted and revealed. Thank you for your consideration and attention to these questions and comments.
Thank you, Mr. Obelinas. Appreciate you reading these in for the record. I know you've shared them with us electronically, shared them with the school board. And I heard the school board discussion last night during the meeting around some of these questions, and I also heard the discussion around responding to these for you as well. So thank you for reading them in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other members of the public like to speak this evening? Okay, seeing none, I will close public input and quickly recap correspondence since our last meeting last week. Thank you to Ms. Stevens for pulling this together. On November 30th, Chair Sun forwarded the link to the working budget development questions. Also on November 30th, School Board Rep Andrew Cutter forwarded the document detailing the cost of the district's vacant positions. On December 1st, School District HR Director Holly Falzone also forwarded the document detailing the cost of the district's vacant positions. On December 1st, Town Administrator Kim Kleiner sent a memo regarding a change to the holiday schedule for town employees. She noted the change does not require an adjustment to the town budget. On December 1st, Chair Sun forwarded the December 7th Budget Committee agenda. And also on December 1st, Ms. Kleiner shared the proposed police union contract, cost associated, and a summary. And then finally on December 3rd, Recording Secretary Matt Sullivan shared the meeting minutes for the November 30th meeting. Is our correspondence since last week. Next, review acceptance of minutes from November 30th. Everyone had an opportunity to review those minutes from last week.
Make a motion to accept them with one change.
I have a motion to accept with one change. So second. Discussion.
Yeah, in the second paragraph of public input, it said that Mr. Obelinas read his email to the Litchfield school budget, the school district, and the budget committee and the school board. He read it to the budget committee.
Okay. We'll make that change. I have a motion and a second. Any additional discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstain, motion carries 8-0-0. All right, before we jump into school business for this evening, we'll do like we did last week and just do Mr. Leary, any updates from the town?
No, we meet on Monday. Nothing's changed since last week, to my knowledge.
One question for the town, if I may.
Sure.
I acknowledge in Mrs. Kleiner's email, Town Minister Kleiner's email about the change in calendar or holiday schedules, right?
Yes.
Why wouldn't the board consider other federal holidays like June 19th as an example to give town employees that day off? I mean, you gave them an additional one, but we should really give them all federal holidays, right? You don't have to answer that, but I'm like, it just caught my mind. Like, it just caught me off guard a little bit. Like,
I wonder if
we're acknowledging some, but not others.
I wonder if it's connected to our systems and other state agencies shut down that day. That seemed to be where when I watched that meeting, the
Yeah.
conversation centered around the ability for people to do their work that day, not having access to systems.
But I would think that's the same argument for other federal
It could be,
holidays.
and I don't know the answer
Yeah.
if.
It was the one that was brought to our attention.
Yeah.
And that's
So-
how we addressed it.
A quick look says that the state of New Hampshire has 10 federal holidays. So my guess is, to the point that if the state recognizes them and they're closed,
Yeah, Juneteenth.
but if Juneteenth is not on it, the state is open, the town can perform their work.
Anything else from Mr. Leary this evening?
Good question, though.
I just had, this just popped in my mind during Mr. Blanis's public input. Did the fire station, when the new fire station was designed and put to warrant, was there, how many plans, I guess, were put together for renovation of the old fire station at the same time? Like, how well was that vetted?
I don't think they had any.
Well, I will tell you that it came before this budget committee. The budget committee said, we're not supporting it. And there was a Board of Selectmen meeting held on a holiday where the engineers, the architects, and the entire team came together.
remember all this.
Because I sat in that meeting.
Well, I'm just
So-
curious how much is expected, how much money is expected to be spent on design questions of two theoretical possibilities?
I wasn't on the board at the time, but I do know that the old fire station was not big enough to house the equipment that they had.
There was a column they kept backing into. They were going
It
to take
was-
down the building.
We had aging apparatus, and
Yeah.
the new size of the apparatus wouldn't fit the new building. There's a number of reasons.
Okay.
But it was looked at, and it was decided that it was not feasible based on
And the
structure.
second floor was not level, and like,
And they kept hitting this central
Yeah.
column. So the
Could be
building.
connected.
Could
so,
So there were no,
the
it was
engineers looked
decided
at
by
it.
the Board of Selectmen not to put a lot of money into,
The concern was that it
renovation
was not,
designs. Okay.
that it was not feasible for it to continue to operate in that manner for structural and other concerns.
okay, thank you.
Anything else from Mr. Leary this evening? All right, switching gears, we'll invite Dr. Jetty and Mr. Totten up. And before we do that, while they're getting set up, the one item I added to the agenda is chair comments. Before we jumped in, really to do a couple of things. I think one, to just kind of recap where we are and what we've done up to this point. Before we do that, I did have an opportunity to watch last night's school board meeting while I was traveling home today. Quite a marathon you all had yesterday. And a couple of things stood out that I think I just wanted to clarify. There were some comments that were made about lackluster participation during the joint sessions from the budget committee. And I think I just want to be really clear that on the first session that we held over at the fire station on November 2nd, we had 6 out of 9 budget committee members there in person. We had 2 that were watching live and asking questions and actually emailing me questions that were added. On November 7th, to the best of my knowledge, we had 4 of 9 that were in attendance. Myself, including others, were watching, asking questions. And we've also leveraged that shared Google Doc as a way for folks who couldn't attend, who weren't able to join in person, to continue to ask those questions. So that comment kind of struck me as I felt like we had good participation, and I think the feedback, for the most part, from this group has been that's been a fairly positive experience, whether we've been able to go in person, watch live, watch recordings later, or leverage the Google Doc. It's provided good collaborative experience to ask those questions and to really streamline our process once we got to presentations by the school board. There was also a comment made that no one was actually going to watch this, which I did. I think later on in the discussion, there was comments about not taking a look at the bonus pools, specifically in comments around the cut that was made for the $243,000. And I do remember I made the comment that that was the lens that I was looking at a portion of that cut. I was looking at those bonus pool amounts that we totaled up that between the numbers themselves and the benefits associated with that I was taking that into consideration when voting for that particular cut. So I just wanted to add those clarifications based on some comments from last night's school board meeting. In addition to that, to recap where we are and what we've done up to this point. So this is the second night of voting that we have scheduled. Last week, we went really kind of budget by budget, department, school by school, and had an opportunity to ask some additional questions, to make motions. At that, and just to recap, and I know the school board shared this last night, but the budget committee made cuts of $506,563. Those were spread across special services, salaries and benefits, 2 positions, the district IT position and the mental health clinician, as well as CHS ground services and legal services as well. Tonight we had kind of tabled food service to have an additional discussion. I know there was a presentation last night. I'll certainly let you all fill in any more details. There wasn't any action taken by the board last night, but I think maybe an opportunity, whether between the 3 of you, to kind of share a high-level update
Sure.
of that discussion that happened last night. we'll open it up for any motions around food service. And then from there, I'm not gonna go budget by budget. If people have additional motions, we'll go to each of those departments or schools.
Right, so quick
this
question
evening.
before we dive in.
Yep.
So where does our increase stand then? Is that,
Yeah, just a second. So the current increase is, Doug, please correct me if I'm wrong, $846,937, which represents 3.5%. Is that correct, Doug? That's over last year's budget.
yeah,
Total reductions is $1,042,000 to
Between the
date.
school board action and budget committee actions, correct. All right, so with that, let's start with food service.
Sure.
And I don't know, Mr. Cutter,
I
Mr.
can-
Cotton, whoever wants
Yeah, I'll
to
start it.
recap the discussion that was had last night for anyone that hasn't had the opportunity to watch that meeting yet. And then we can entertain any motions around food service.
Yeah, so thank you for the opportunity to present the update. In short, the board did discuss food service last night to quite a detailed degree. We have asked the director as well as the business administrator to model up a few revised scenarios with various price increases to see and assess where our projections will land based upon those revised rates. What was presented last evening is the expected revenue will be significantly short, both for fiscal year '24, our current fiscal year, as well as fiscal year '25. Currently, our predicted expenses for fiscal year '24 are $659,000 and change, where our expected revenue is $503,000. So there's, $150,000+ that we're already projecting as a deficit. And for fiscal year '25, the expenses are projected to grow to $705,000, meaning that will be somewhere in the ballpark of $200,000. So we need, I think the board, in summary, the board recognized that we need to do something. We are still evaluating what that something is, including price increases to offset some of that, even if we're already at the near high for what we charge for our meals across the district, and it was presented last night about where we fall against all of our cohorts and peers, all this jazz. Even if we were to raise the rates quite significantly, we would still have a deficit to cover. It would be less, yes, but there would still be a deficit. So I think the general consensus was we can no longer effectively call this a self-funded program because it's not, and it hasn't been for a few years, and we're going to change that terminology very quickly here, and we're going to try and do what we can within reason to offset some of these projections. We just don't know what those new rates will be quite yet.
Just a couple of additional comments and thoughts that I had after watching it. So you mentioned the peer cohort, and either open to anybody. Do they all have line items in their budget to offset? I assume whether we're talking about Pelham or whoever else, Milford, whoever else is in that cohort, do they have line items to clear that gap in their budget? Is that how
Some
they
do,
handle
some
it?
don't.
Some do, some don't.
So we were most interested in Pelham because a lot of the peer cohort might have 3,000 students, 4,000 students, so it's not the same if you're dividing it out amongst who's buying lunches type of thing.
Yeah.
So that's a tougher thing to compare to than academics. But Pelham is closer at 1,645 students, but we haven't been able to get an answer from Pelham at this point. Sunapee, which is pretty small, they typically have a line item that goes over, as our understanding, but it's around 20,000, so
They have less than 1,000 kids, right?
394.
394.
They're tiny.
So,
I also talked with the superintendent in Wilton Lineborough today, and they also run a deficit. They don't budget for it, whatever it is, they know they have to cover. So they just plan to, as part of the year-end scooping of money from funds, they cover it out of that. And so their deficit range between 20,000 and 100,000. So they're somewhat comparable to us size-wise.
How big are they? Oh, size-wise comparable.
I think they're a little smaller than we are because it's the two towns, but it's pretty rural.
I also thought you made a really interesting point last night about the fact that New Hampshire was the only state in New England that did not extend the free meals. I think that was insightful and unfortunate.
The superintendents were pretty upset about it, but again, it's the way the state chose to take the funds that they received from COVID relief, and they use them in other ways.
So my understanding was it was part of the national program. It was the expectation it was going to be self-funded. That's where the whole idea originated. It was part of the food service program that it was intended and expected to be self-funded. So is that not the case?
I mean, clearly it's not the case.
Well, no, I know
I
it's
mean,
not the case, but my understanding is one of the reasons why we kept using that term is because that's what the federal government expected.
Yeah, that was the intent.
The intent is for, so,
The intent has changed.
well, the intent is also that they're gonna fully fund special ed, and they don't do that either, but that doesn't change the requirement to provide it.
And transportation.
So, the reality is, like, are we, if we're rolling it into the taxpayer expense, and that's what we're gonna accept, we're expanding our program, we're expanding services. And you know how I feel about expansion of services. Like, this is, regardless of what you want, if it has been a self-funding, with the expectation it would return to self-funding, and now we're saying, it's never gonna be self-funding, just accept it, then in my opinion, we're expanding this program. It needs to go before the voters. Are we okay with this? Are we okay with accepting this philosophy? In which case, okay, fine, so be it, we budget it. But the taxpayers have a right to decide whether or not that's the way they want this program to go.
How do you even put that on a warrant, though? There's no, you can't predict the money.
Well, you can say, make it up.
Obligated to provide it, right?
Yeah.
But
And
whether or
have
not
to
you can
provide
include
kids.
a line item in the budget for it would be the thing.
I mean, the reality is, I mean, I tossed around the idea, even if we go up to $5 a lunch, which is astronomical, right? In terms of school lunches, that's like high, really high, right? We still wouldn't be able to cover the deficit that we're projecting.
So can we continue?
And we would likely lose participation in that program, further creating a bigger deficit.
I would agree with that.
So do we have to take a look at the food we're offering then? Like, if we can't just raise prices, do we need to go back to the idea
Of expired food and
didn't say
and
expired
canned
food.
fruits and vegetables? No, I think we're good with that.
Undersized portions.
no, don't put words in my mouth. But
Well,
what I'm saying is,
but that's what it was, right? And
So
so,
you go back here, what do you mean then?
well, my understanding is like we have incredibly locally sourced farm fresh foods. There are services that allow for bulk production of food for the very purpose of providing to schools and other organizations. So clearly we can't live within our current budget, so have we explored other options? Changes, meal portions, the meals we're offering, less expensive supplies and meals.
I wonder if a different way to think about this is there an opportunity for an RFP to see what other businesses provide this service to schools, and is there any potential cost savings?
I don't think there'd be any cost savings. I think it would be more
I don't
cost.
know the answer to
Then
that
put the
question.
vending
I would
machines
agree,
in to help
because if you
offset
go
it.
with a vendor, and
an
there are-
Aramark or something,
there are companies
yeah.
that come in, right? Chart House or something is one of them. It's a for-profit corporation.
Yep.
We're not a for-profit. So no matter how you slice it, there's a cut going to somebody that isn't currently part of our system. So there's that component. And to Carrie's point, and I think Lauren did a great job last night.
She did.
I mean, we can open up a can of peaches, and we can put those canned gloppy peaches into a bowl and serve those, or we can offer fresh fruit. We're choosing to offer fresh fruit. And I think in a town like Litchfield, fresh fruit is the right offering to make, to be
Which
honest
is
with you.
fine, but then our
'Cause
prices are
the
$5.
But the can of peaches end up in the trash, and it really isn't that much more expensive. I really think that, we have to continue to work on, the system that we have. But to your point with the National Lunch Program, I don't know what the origin of it was, because it was before I was born. But the point being, this is the program that we have, and making sure kids are fed well and are ready to access their education, that's the business that we're in, and I think
And
we
not for
can do
nothing,
this.
right? I mean, fair point. And not for nothing, right? I'm gonna say 5 years ago, however long ago, the board received quite a bit of feedback from the residents and from parents saying, this is not okay, this is not acceptable.
Okay.
Right? So there was an overhaul of that program
to bring in better quality foods and to have the proper governance over how those
Sure.
how they're being run. at each
In
of the
which
schools.
case the price ought to reflect it. Go
But we-
to a grocery store and
Say that,
find,
we already increased the rates. And again, we did.
go
and
to
we're
the
already
grocery
one of
store
the
and find
highest.
me a nice prepackaged sandwich for under $3.
I think-
Where our food prices are not consistent with the cost of providing that food. Clearly, otherwise we wouldn't be losing money. So, how, is that on,
The
is
highest-
the onus on the taxpayer to fund it? Or is it the onus on the parent to feed their kid? Like, it's a challenging situation, but when we're looking at an $800,000 increase, plus contracts for the school,
I get
plus
it.
contracts for the police,
I
plus
appreciate
all this other stuff, there has to
get it.
be
I get it.
some buy-in from all parties.
I get that, and that's why the board is
I
considering
think the
increasing rates.
conversation of raising prices makes sense.
So just for everyone's awareness and for those listening in, right, in terms of prices and kind of where we're at, there were 13 neighboring towns that were analyzed. The highest price for breakfast that's offered was $2.25 across all 13. Litchfield's at $2, so we're 25 cents less. For elementary school lunch, the highest price offered across all 13 is $3.25. We're at $3
We
already.
compare plate to plate, though.
Highest price for middle school lunch is $3.50. We're at $3.25, so we're about 25 cents less across those three. High school are a little bit more. High school highest price across all was $3.85, and we're $3.50.
Okay.
Right, but again, even if we were to increase this to $5, which is significant, we would still be having this conversation because it would be in the hole.
Again, I would be interested to see, for $3.50, this school offers this, are we offering the same or more at $3.25? So I appreciate the due diligence on the prices,
The
but we're
food
not.
portions are the same. That was presented last night.
So $5 doesn't put us in the hole if the same amount of students keep buying. Now, I don't think necessarily the same amount of students will keep buying at $5. I think a decent amount will, because if you go to the grocery store, you're still paying a lot to pack a lunch as well. But $5 would, you know, if we move the lunches up, and that kind of goes with breakfast coming up a little bit and snacks coming up a little bit, you know, it's a projection of 686,000. So
There was a good discussion last night, and I appreciated Mr. Shoemaker being attentive to it.
686 on a 705,000 expense though, so we're still in the red.
The number that don't qualify for free and reduced lunch and how close that is, that's a big jump for people that
Huge.
you all had that discussion about last night.
And I think it's a terrible idea to go that high, but I do think there's an adjustment that's needed.
I think too, we forget, we could offer up a, Good Samaritan fund or something. If people within the community would like to pay it forward and buy a child's school lunch, let them pay it. So I'm just saying, but when we're saying like it's all or nothing, I don't think that's a fair assessment. Like, we can raise the prices, try to cover the cost so that the taxpayer's not on the hook, but while being sensitive to those on the bubble by providing those who truly want to an opportunity to help out without requiring it of everybody. Put your money where your mouth is.
What would you do, Selectman Larry?
It's a tough one, because I think you need to feed the kids. If it was me, if I had my choice, I would just put a line item in there to fund the program and give the kids free lunch. That's just me. Now, I'd raise questions about, being in the red and paying benefits for summertime help, and, and I asked, when that started, because it never used to be the case. I never got an answer to that. Just that they wouldn't take the benefits away. But I think maybe we're mismanaging the money a little bit by doing this. That's a little bit of money to pay 2.5 months of benefits to people that aren't working. But that's just another soapbox, but if, I say just put in a budget line, this is our food service. We're gonna make sure every kid in town gets a meal, whether it's breakfast or lunch, after school, whatever. Just do it so that the taxpayers can accept it and bite it and go with it.
No pun intended.
You know what that dollar amount would be?
Probably gonna be $1 million.
Probably 600.
Yeah.
Well,
Maybe
it's costing them
657.
$700,000 now, so it can't be 600,000, right? It's costing $700,000 to run the program
And I'm
now. It's gonna
mistaken,
be
Lauren
more
said
next year.
she does like 90,000 meals.
Yeah,
Correct.
so,
This year is projected at
That's what I'm saying.
660 thereabouts, and next year is projected at 705.
so 600 is not gonna do it. I mean, just, put in the number that's needed to be and carry it and just,
Remember when food service was 400?
I remember all the complaints we got too.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, so am I. I
So-
also know this board wouldn't approve $600,000 in a budget for food.
So, go ahead.
if you told me it's gonna
Curious.
feed the kids, I'd vote for it.
I'm curious about, you said at the meeting last night that the income level for free and reduced lunch is extremely low. But you can qualify for free and reduced lunch if you qualify for other government assistance programs. If we're raising prices, do you think there would also be an addition of people or applying for those government assisted programs, because that would help our grant applications? Can we push those assistance
The question
programs
you're
more?
asking is actually asked in every school district in New Hampshire, because
Okay.
we know that the free and reduced number is used for title grants, it's used for a lot of things, it's used, in terms of state, test scores even. I mean, we're looking at how are our free and reduced students performing compared to our non-free and reduced students, so it's a huge number, but still, getting families to complete the paperwork and to apply, there's a pride factor that is, and I mean, Lauren will go, she will sit right next to Doug, help Doug fill that paperwork out. We will do everything we can to make sure that people have access to that resource. But for some people, they just don't want to share the numbers that are necessary in order to complete it. So it's a challenge, it's a struggle, but we certainly do that outreach. And I think you heard Lauren say last night, there's a provision in the law that she and I, and again, I don't know the details on it, but she and I have an ability to sign off on a application without having the parent necessarily do the completion. If the child is in a variety of assessments, if the child is not eating, we do have an ability to intervene on that. And that's what she hinted or said last night, that she had worked with me to get a child qualified. So we've only done that a couple of times, but there is a provision.
So a couple of years ago, when it was free for everybody, obviously a lot of people stopped filling out the paperwork. So last year, it was a real priority of ours to, when we sat down to talk, how are we promoting this? Are we ensuring that we're promoting this to people? Do you have the time to sit down with people? Yep, so she was completely on board and promoting it and taking the time with families. We get some, but like other schools, there are families out there that haven't applied that would get it. So we wish they would apply, but it's pride. It's sometimes it's not just wanting to pick up that phone, and if they do pick up that phone, we will happily answer them and happily kind of sit down with them and make sure that they're going through it. So
Are we back at the same levels as before the free lunches? Have you looked at that?
Like pre-pandemic?
Mhm.
I'm not certain of that.
I mean, number of students.
Number who have
Number
applied.
oh.
and-
I would go with the percentage rate, because we've had a decline in population, but we can pull that. I don't know that off the top of my head.
Other comments or questions based on the information that was shared from last night's meeting?
So just want to also throw out there, we are part of a buyer's group, so as far as when we purchase ours, it's with multiple other schools too, so, all those schools are coming together in order to get cheaper prices. So Lauren is definitely part of that, she watches the prices, she's got a lot of pride in this too. She serves good food, and she feels terrible every day that revenues aren't matching expenses.
I heard her say last night that a lot of her colleagues do inventory once a month.
Yep.
And she does it once a week.
Yep.
To make sure that the orders are as fine-tuned as possible.
That is correct. The other thing too, and just to correct a couple of comments, because I think Mr. Burke had called it restaurant quality food in a previous meeting, and you called it farm to table food tonight. And I just want to be clear, we're not serving restaurant quality. This is not farm to table. We're simply buying fresh food. And so, we don't have Facebook lighting up with horrible pictures that kids are taking of what was put in front of them any longer. Because what they're getting is a reasonable meal, proper portion sizes, and it looks and tastes good. That's what she's providing. this is not fine dining by any stretch. And, just to be really clear, it's what you would expect, good wholesome home cooking, if you would, is what's being provided.
Putting my parent hat on for a minute, I have two of the pickiest eaters in Litchfield, and they probably eat school lunch more than home lunch, which I think says a lot about the quality of food.
I would say
At your house.
two out of
I didn't say that. That was you that said that.
2 out of my 3 kids, same thing. Most often they'll elect for the school lunch.
Any other comments or questions? Because what I'd like to do is I want to open up the food service budget. We did not really do that last week, and have an opportunity for any motions and discussions around that. And then please remind me, the budget that holds the $100,000, is that the business office? Yeah. So we'll start with food service, and then we'll go to business to close the loop on the food service conversation for any motions. Once we complete that, then we can go back to any other departments or schools that we'd like to. So we'll start with food service. At the top, it says 21 food service fund. This one currently shows an increase of 44,000. Oh, let me make sure. Let me double check. I just lost my place. Sorry. Currently shows an increase of 44,194. Correct. Do I have any motions on this portion of the food service budget, or any additional questions?
So what you're saying then is that right now, you anticipate a greater than the $100,000. So it's currently $100,000 towards it.
In the current budget, yes.
No, it's the current proposed budget.
So FY24, what I heard Mr. Cutter say is there was $100K that was put in last year, and there's an anticipated deficit of $150K this year, so there's a $50K gap approximately.
Yep.
Currently in the FY25 is another $100,000, the same as last year. They anticipate that gap to grow to $200K, which would, based on what's currently in the budget and what is currently projected, would be a gap of $100K.
And that's without any price adjustments.
That is without any price adjustments, that's correct. Even if we were to increase, and that's why increasing rates in that discussion is important, because that allows us to figure out what the right number for a deficit that we can plan on is. I don't know how the board's gonna decide on this one, but I think it's safe to say we're probably going to have a deficit of at least $100,000
In FY25.
in FY25,
If nothing changes.
Sure.
even if it does change.
But the reality is there's an opportunity to pay for that out of end of year funds. So.
It's harder to do that when we've cut the budget over $1 million.
We say that every time, and when it's bare bones, blah, blah, blah. And then we go and return $1 million, underspend by $1 million, or 800,000, or 700,000. So I hear you, but my cynical hat is on, and I'm thinking
Have a
we can
motion,
absorb.
make it.
I'm gonna motion to reduce the budget by $100,000.
So the
Whatever,
business,
all right,
not the
fine,
food
business,
service,
fine.
right?
When we get to the business one.
So
well,
let's finish, close the loop on this one. Any motions on the food service budget? Okay, seeing none, we will move to the business office. At the top says 2311 school board. And that particular line item that we are discussing is, what was that? Page 4. Page 4, thank you.
Can I make my motion now?
You may, yes.
I make a motion to reduce this business budget by the amount of $100,000.
I have a motion by Ms. Douglas. So a second?
Second for discussion.
Second by Mr. Leary. Discussion?
More, all right, even
On the
if.
motion, discussion on the motion.
Discussion on the motion. Even if we raise prices and run a deficit, the traditional unexpended fund balance at the end of the year could absorb this money. We've been stated that other schools, that's how they fund this deficit. If we're gonna go down this road, I believe that at least would be a good start. Pay it at end of year fund balance.
Is that where this is coming from?
Not currently.
100,000?
It's coming from the business line.
Yeah, from the business line.
To be
But
budgeted.
from your underspent?
We're gonna have to cover it somehow. That number has to be zero when we close our books, right? And so we'll have to, no matter what, we'll have to do a transfer to figure this out.
And currently, that transfer has come from the unexpended fund balance.
Absolutely.
Right, so, the last couple of years anyway, that's how it's been covered.
So this acknowledges that it's not gonna break even, and so at some point it makes sense, to put that in front of people as far as, do we raise money in order to offset what's not gonna break even? Because even though there have been fund balances, there's also, it is a lean budget, there's just positions that are open, which is what's been, increasing the budget or increasing the fund balance, but we can't get to a point where we're overspending the budget too.
Sure.
So,
In which case, decisions have to be made, and in this case, I think that I'm not ready to accept turning a self-funded program that's always been self-funded into a taxpayer-funded program without a larger conversation.
Just on that real quick, it hasn't been, we did the quick look, this has not been self-funded since 2019.
That is not the intent, though, and it's always been sold to the voters
Just
as
saying.
self-funded.
4
It's
years.
listed under the self-funded programs.
We had COVID in there, right?
Any additional discussion? I'll tell you where my thinking is. Oh, go ahead, Mr. Lee.
And I'm using this, what she's mentioning, along with your food service fund, which is what we just discussed. It says you're increasing $44,194.
That's a different, sorry, yeah.
No, I know that, but this is being used to offset a deficit or whatever, but, so are you really raising it $144,000 with the $100,000 that you wanna put in?
no, we expect the expenses for the food service to be to raise by 44,000. So of that total amount, we were asking for 100,000 to be raised by taxpayers. A majority of it coming from either the federal program or students who are paying. And then if there's a deficit at that point, to come from fund balance. But the expenses aren't associated with the 100,000. The 100,000 is one of the lumps of money that will equal to the total expenses.
My thinking on this is, I probably made a very incorrect assumption that tonight we might have more information about price changes.
Well, that was the hope, but.
And so, I don't know that I'm ready to make a change on this right now without knowing what prices are gonna look like. My hope would be, because we have the opportunity up until deliberative in February, to make any final changes, that we would have that information by then, and there could be an opportunity to revisit this. So that's where my thinking is currently.
I will say that having been on that side of the table in that seat for many years, right, I've been accused of making motions that will cripple the district, right? From my seat here tonight, this motion will significantly cripple the district. This one will hurt.
I hear you, and I respectfully disagree.
Any additional discussion?
I agree with you. I mean, if they're projecting next year to be closer to $200,000 deficit, they could probably make up half of that with a price increase, but not the whole thing. And to try and float $100,000 and expect to cover it in fund balance is it's too big of a number.
I want to see what those price changes are going to be if they happen, what sort of revenue that would bring in, and then what then would the estimated gap be? And I think that would help me better inform my decision.
So I will say that, and the board hasn't formally discussed this, but I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say, we are at our next meeting going to be talking about this once again. We are going to be discussing rates, whether we decide at our next board meeting.
Which is
to be-
December 20th.
Which is December 20th, or if it's decided upon January 3rd, it'll be one of those two meetings where a decision will be made.
That's helpful.
One more question, actually. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay. One of the things, and I have to praise Mrs. Crowley for this, because she really has turned this program around. It's a fight almost every morning to tell them they have to eat lunch from home, because we don't want the extra expense of buying lunch every day. But I do notice that on the calendars more and more they're serving great lunch options, which are things like chicken nuggets, corn dogs, cheeseburgers, chicken patties, all the favorites.
Today was
Wondering
tacos.
so I'm wondering if maybe some of that, we talk about serving food that is too expensive. I'm wondering sort of does the buying, like serving a more popular meal, does that make enough money to like over, say, pasta, which would be much less expensive to make?
She said,
Like
Lauren
Gil's
said-
Pizza
So-
on Wednesday is an expensive thing to run,
Right,
but
so-
all the kids like it, or most of the kids like
That's what I'm wondering, but are we kind of losing money, or is it actually making more money because we're selling more of those meals? Or are we losing money because we're selling better ingredients and more desirable meals? And is that some of the
It sounds
the
like
pricing?
you-
I'm wondering if we can, like, if there's one pasta option a week, is that gonna
She
cut
did-
maybe some of our expenses?
Ms. Crowley did
Has she
say
looked
last.
at that?
She did say last night. I fairly certain I heard her say that pasta was one of the cheapest options that they have.
Yes.
I wonder if, not to give Ms. Crowley more work, but I wonder if, as a part of that analysis, is looking at, to your point about Gil's Pizza, where are we seeing those biggest losses? Right? Is it Pizza Day? Is it
I mean,
Cheeseburger
I
Day?
see the checks in the manifests that we sign to Gil's Pizza, and I can say they're anywhere between $2,500 and $3,000 every manifest that I sign.
So, like,
But are we
without
making money to?
Is that every
to
week?
Account for that?
Well, we meet every other week, so that'd be
Every 2 weeks?
every 2 weeks.
So without like significantly impacting the quality of food, is there an opportunity to say, well, the two places we're losing our most money are pizza and cheeseburgers, hypothetically. You know, maybe we switch to a different pizza vendor. Maybe we, instead of cheeseburgers, it's pasta. Like, if that's a part of the discussion, I think it helps inform your price increases, and I think it helps inform how we can minimize that gap.
Like if she were to change it, one meal a week is pasta.
Right. I don't know.
Does the lack of sales make that not a feasible option to reduce costs?
We
Dude,
will,
spaghetti and meatballs is,
Well,
we can take
maybe
that
no
back to
meatballs.
Lauren. Just keep in mind that, although this year she's been better, but she has been understaffed, she's been covering, so, that level of analysis when you're in that environment can be one more thing to do. But certainly, you raise a good question, because it's as simple as, plotting it back to the menu, how many lunches were sold on that day. We're getting a monthly count, but let's do it by menu count, and just do a little bit of a deeper dive into it. So we'll take that back and see what we can do.
All right, any additional new discussion on the motion at hand? Seeing none, roll call vote. I'm not gonna go backwards this week. Mr. Hayes,
I'm a yes.
Mr. Cutter,
No.
Mr. Leary,
I'm gonna be no, because I would be more comfortable at 50,000 than 100,000.
You're ready to give 600,000 to the kids.
Well,
Miss-
yeah, if you bring that forward, yes.
Ms. Douglas,
yes.
I am a no. Ms.
Put it out
Stevens,
there.
No,
Mr. Barca,
No.
and Mr. Burke.
No.
Taylor's not.
Motion fails 2-6-0. Any additional motions on this particular business budget, specifically right now related to food service?
What was the nose?
I'll make a motion to
Sorry, it was
increase
2-6-0.
line 521 to
I voted no.
$700,000 to make it.
I'm sorry, I voted yes to reduce it.
She voted yes.
Yes, we're missing a member.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Scott's not here. Yes.
I'm gonna do this for Mr. Leary. I'm gonna make a motion to increase line 5221 to $700,000 to fully fund. lunch.
Second.
A motion by Mr. Barca and I have a second by Mr. Cutter.
Contract.
Additional discussion that we haven't covered already.
I just throw it out there for him. Who wants to?
And
think it's a
Derek,
Wants to
fabulous
feed the
idea.
kids.
Derek, what was
We
that
should have
amount?
money tricks. I
Derek.
want a branch of it.
What was that amount again, Derek?
Increasing it by $600,000 to $700,000 total. It's not gonna pass. Just
I know, but I would love a clipping.
in an
Any-
ideal world, right?
Any new discussion?
I also want to be able to support a teacher's contract.
I really think that this should be something that should be on a warrant article.
Fair.
Put it to the voters, let them vote. I would vote for it, I would support it at this board. I would absolutely do that. But on this, tonight, I will vote no on that motion.
Fair.
Okay?
What happens if that fails?
If what fails?
What happens if it goes to warrant article? I'm just
Fully funded by the taxpayers. You still can run it.
just playing this out of my mind, right? And if it fails, Do we
not
not
like
give the kids lunch?
No, you just do what you're doing now.
You just can't, it wouldn't be.
It just defaults back to our
Stays
current
same.
program.
Back to square one.
Yeah, because the
Kinda like-
warrant article would be to change it from self-funded
Yes.
to fully funded by the
Adam and Seth.
taxpayer.
Yeah, there's a dollar
Alright.
figure and free lunches for every kid. And if not, then you go back, like we did with the fire engine, you go back to square one.
Roll call vote. Mr. Hayes.
It's not always the worst thing.
That's a no.
Mr. Cutter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mr. Leary.
No.
Ms. Douglas.
No.
I am a no. Ms. Stevens.
No.
Mr. Barca.
Yes.
Mr. Burke.
Yes.
Motion
Close vote.
fails.
I like it.
3-5.
Does
Any
that have a-
additional motions this evening on food service business currently?
4-4 would have been a better vote.
And then we'll,
I know, but it would have been closer.
I'd like to make a motion to reduce line 5221 by $50,000.
a motion by Mr. Hayes. Do I have a second?
Yes.
Second by Ms. Douglas.
Are you back to the
Say-
same line?
This is the same line item. This is 100K instead of reducing by 100, cutting it in half to 50K. New discussion.
I think this just goes to those watching that shows, like, everyone's just up in air about what to do about this, right? We're trying to figure this out.
Some of us are.
We need more time.
I don't disagree.
know-
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Hayes.
Well, I mean, my feeling is it should be self-funded. It should be not up to the taxpayers to pay for it.
Yeah.
Either increase the price or, change the menu, but it should be as it was intended, self-funded.
I don't disagree with that thinking. I think the goal should be to get it as close to self-funded as possible. That's a really big gap that we're at right now that seems to be continuing to grow.
Then they have some work to do. That's all it comes down to.
I think one of the things we can't do is we can't divide by more students, which other districts get to do. I think that's the tough thing. I mean, you look at sports teams, the bigger markets draw the bigger names type of thing. So smaller markets have smaller amounts of dollars. We can't divide by the same amount.
Right, but-
So
the
I would like us to be self-funded too. I truly would.
The option is the student can bring the lunch from home. And if they feel as though they can, put a lunch together for less than what we're charging, then so be it.
Any additional new discussion? All right.
Next year, bring a warrant article forward, right? To give every kid in the district free lunch. Don't put your salaries in there or any of that other stuff, just what it costs to feed every kid in the town.
And by next year, you mean March of 2025?
Yeah,
Thank you.
and I think you put that on a warrant article, I bet the town will pass it.
I don't think so.
I think they will. When you talk about feeding the kids, absolutely,
All right.
absolutely.
Roll call. Mr.
Ryan,
Hayes.
I'll even get up and on a soapbox with you and push it. How's that?
Mr. Hayes.
I'm a yes.
We'll do it out there.
Mr. Cutter.
No.
Mr. Leary.
Yes.
Ms. Douglas.
This is the
This is
50.
to reduce by 50K.
Instead of-
I was good with 100, so yes.
I am a no. Ms. Stevens.
No.
Mr. Barca.
No.
And Mr. Burke.
No.
Motion fails 3-5-0. Any additional motions, food service, business this evening? Not that we can't revisit this after the school board takes any action. All right, seeing none, go
I
ahead.
just thought of something. I know the elementary and middle school is a little different, but anyone who has a high school student would probably say the same thing. There's no way my son's getting up in enough time to make a lunch to bring to school.
You make it the night before.
He'll eat. He's too busy doing everything else. He'll eat 2 lunches and pay for them, but he's not making any lunch. And I think that's most high school kids. That's,
I have a high schooler, night before.
I'll be
Ready
honest
to
with
go.
you, as a parent, sometimes that's a challenge
This is what
too.
you bring to anybody's lunch.
mine just buys 2 lunches.
All right, I think we're certainly gonna revisit food service, over the course of the next month.
But in that case, then you're paying for the convenience, and so an extra buck or two is worth it for you.
We appreciate the support of the program.
I'm gonna open it up for us to revisit, any, school or departments that we went through last week. Clarifying questions. We do have, maybe just as a transition period here, Dr. Jetty, we do have one question from last week that wasn't answered yet. It was Ms. Douglas's question around the software for, the sharing
Language?
services. What was that?
Mango language?
Yes.
Right. So I have reached out to the librarian and I'm waiting, we don't understand yet the, what they have available,
Okay,
so.
so we've reached out, we haven't heard back yet.
Correct.
Okay.
Do we have an idea of where our default budget falls?
We'll get that out, next week, so kind of
The board has not
finalizing it.
seen that yet.
Well, it just depends on like how aggressive do I go on this one?
I heard you, I heard you say last night, and if memory serves, last year, we saw that very close to the budget hearing. Sounds like we'll see that a lot earlier this year. Is that am I making a true statement?
I mean, so I'm gonna send it to the school board next week. I'm fine if they
Got it.
send it to the budget committee too, but I don't know if that's a school board decision first or not, so.
I think the
but
school
it
board
doesn't-
should evaluate it first before it's sent, because I think we'd wanna just validate it for accuracy.
I'm fine
Right.
with
Who
that.
sets the default number? It's the board.
The
It's your
board.
number.
Correct.
Absolutely it is.
Yeah.
The board
So
does.
it needs to go there first.
It should be very
I mean, if you
critical,
share
so
it,
it
and
shouldn't be that
if they're
difficult.
looking at it on the 20th, then I would think after that meeting, it could be shared with the
I
budget
think it
committee.
should be higher than the operating budget.
I'm sure you do. That hat color has totally changed.
I have to try.
Any,
Poking the bear
It is
tonight.
a very, for the most part, black and white, what you go up and what you go down by. So you'll see things that go up and you'll see things that go down, and it's to what was approved last year. So this current year's budget is what we go up and what we go down by. So, if we put in a new position, we don't go up by a new position on the default budget. So, we went down in energy costs, so we're gonna be going down in energy costs on default budget. We have to, kind of follow IEPs, so you'll see that due to IEPs, there are areas that are going up on the default budget. So anything that's legally required, we need to follow. So, other than that, the thought is to keep it the same as what was voted by the town.
any motions this evening?
So I wouldn't mind a little bit of guidance, because at last meeting, there was a cut in salaries and benefits of $243,000. So when we report out to the taxpayers and to the DRA, it's kind of more by function. So what I believe the $243,000 was based off of was the open positions. So those open positions are in regular ed, special ed, grounds and maintenance, as well as, I guess regular ed again too. So
And I didn't
that-
look at it that way, Doug. I actually, my thinking wasn't for me, and
Okay.
again, because it was a bottom line cut, I was comfortable with it because in my mind, I was including the bonus money. Obviously, it's actually still in there. We haven't touched it and cut it, but I felt like that's where I was justifying some of the math there.
Can I just ask a couple of questions about that? So the police contract's done, right?
Oh, it's been submitted for approval.
It's approved, it's ratified by both parties? Can we get a copy of that, Bob?
Sure.
What are the raises for the police officers?
I'll send it.
You have it?
Proposed is 5, 4, and 4.
544.
544.
That is correct.
So, I ask that because you're looking at the pool that we have, and we haven't settled with our teachers yet. Our support staff, we have an agreement in place. I can't remember the number that they're getting. But this pool is 3% for the directors and
For raises.
the non-union people, correct? And then the bonus pool was another 2 on top of that, which is 5 overall. And the reason it was broken out was to allow kind of that standard increase of 3, but then to have the additional pool for those employees who have done well. So I'll give you an example. If you, can I use you? On TV?
you must.
In front of the whole team. Anybody who doesn't think that this guy deserved an increase for coming to Litchfield and
Phenomenal job.
resolving the issues that we have, and taking a lead, and you've all thanked him, and you know what? It's in his paycheck. I needed the ability to be able to compensate employees who are performing well, and this guy's one of them. And so the point being, when you cut that pool, you're putting us back to 3% for everybody, which is under what you've agreed you'll pay to your police officers.
Nobody's
and-
agreed yet, though.
I hear you.
Hold on.
But it's under what you're planning and what you know you have to do to get police officers and to retain police officers. And, again, the door is still open on where we are gonna go with teachers, because we don't have an answer to that. But the point being, that's 5, and that's the number that the 3 plus 2 is the 5, so.
And I think, my thinking on it was,
Can I just, real quick, you can say that you're gonna, and this is not a knock on you at all, okay, so don't take it that way. We also have a stipulation that all our salaried people get 2% annual increases. And we've not had anybody,
you're talking about non-union?
all our non-union salaried, so if you collect salary, a set figure, 2% annual. And nobody's quit and said it's a lousy raise.
I
And
think,
not that he doesn't do a great job, don't get me wrong, I'm just saying, you just brought something, I mean, you brought the police contract into it, and I'm telling you that police aren't salary, they're hourly. Okay, so that's different, and that all our salaried people, I'll give you the example of that, get 2% annual increases.
Well,
So
I could give you my opinion on that, Bob, but I think
I
you're
could
way.
give you my opinion on a lot of
I,
things.
I think you're way undercompensating there, and in a market where we're losing teachers and people are able to simply go to a neighboring district, and the neighboring districts are offering raises that exceed 3%, that's just the reality of what we're facing, and to be clear.
where I took issue with it was, I think it was the term bonus. I don't disagree with what you just said about Doug.
Yeah.
What I have seen historically, and maybe this is just a function of New Hampshire and me not fully understanding administrative contracts when it comes to school districts, I've seen a superintendent have the ability to say, Doug gets 5% based on job performance, based on things that are outlined in his evaluation that's associated with that. And because of that, his raise, we don't call it a bonus, is gonna be this. And it's tied to metrics that, based on his job performance. Person over here gets a 3% raise that's tied to their performance and value. I mean, my company, for example, we just handed out our merit increases, and I can tell you everybody on my team was different based on their performance from last year, and that's what it was tied to. And it was a range that falls in everything that we're talking about, nothing higher and nothing lower. They fell within those ranges based on their job performance. And yes, it's hard to compare public and private, but my experience on the public side in other states has been people got different raises based on their job performance, based on things that were tied to evaluation metrics, et cetera. I'd be comfortable with that if we said those raises were tied to those expectations and the superintendent had the opportunity to hand out a raise above 3% for high-performing employees to retain, et cetera. I'm comfortable with that because you do the work and you excel. I'm okay with that. That's my personal philosophy, though.
And historically, that has been what we have to work with. That is the way the pool has operated here. But in having conversations with the board, because this concept of a bonus pool emerged from a board conversation that we had last year. And it was over how the superintendent had divided, I'm talking about myself, aren't I? How I had divided that pool up, okay? And, the business model is one where there is that compensation to recognize the employees who have gone above and beyond. But if you're working with 3% and you're trying to retain an entire workforce, tell me what wiggle room you have, like who's getting less than the cost of living in order to award somebody for doing an outstanding job. So that's the challenge that we had. So, we may have erred. Maybe we should have just increased that pool to 5 and then allowed us to be able to work, up to 5 and so forth. But the way we did it is it was actually Peter's advice, Andrew's advice. It was a business sector model of a pool that is able to reward and compensate the employees who have done well.
I think we were looking at, inflation, and it's gone up a decent amount, and 3% isn't necessarily always keeping up with that. So what adding the word bonus does to that too is it doesn't lock it in for future. You get the bonus that year, and then the next year that bonus is not going to go up by, say, if you go up by 3% again. It's not like you retain that bonus and then you're going up by 3% of that bonus included too. That
Compounding.
it doesn't compound anymore. So
That's exactly what I was gonna say, so.
yeah.
I understand.
Perfect.
I understand this isn't in the budget committee's purview, but I think I would feel more comfortable about it if I knew that those bonuses were tied to performance metrics.
That's exactly what the conversation is. They're tied to performance.
Okay.
So bring it back to Mr. Totten's request of the budget committee, right? There was a $243,000 motion. The school,
You're referring to the salaries and benefits bottom line,
Yep.
correct? Yep.
the school would like some direction from the budget committee about what function specifically that should be applied to and where we can take that from. What I did for the board just a moment ago, you'll have your computers open, I sent around the school function codes, so you'll have very clearly the list of functions for point of reference.
So is the ask that we revise, I mean, we took action on that, so
Well, it's personnel is where it came out of, right?
is the ask that we, I'm just trying to wrap my head around this.
Salaries and benefits, right?
Using the same analogy that's used with the town, it's a bottom line budget, and they can take the money from wherever they want. Same thing we had to do when cuts were made to the town. You figure out where it comes from.
That has historically
And there's
been our
always-
philosophy, has it not?
I find it amusing, well, because we could say, it's attrition, put it here. We can say, oh, it's the bonus and attrition. At the end of the day, you can still give your bonuses if you're, because it is a bottom line budget.
Right. So Doug, let
Yeah,
me
I didn't
help.
know if, I mean, a lot of budget committees, when they do make a bottom line cut, they also identify the functions. So I didn't know if there was any guidance
We
at
don't have
this
that.
budget committee.
We don't have that
It's been a long-standing discussion and debate amongst whose responsibility is what, where. When it favors one party, they like to say one. When it favors the other party likes to say. But at the end of the day, as we're often reminded, it is a bottom line budget. And therefore, well, I agree that I would apply it against the bonuses, because I don't like the term bonus in
I
here.
don't think that would cover it all.
But it's only one portion of it, right? But it all comes out of, was it salaries and benefits?
attrition.
I guess in my head, just to get where I came from, it was probably a combination of 1,100 and 1,201. I just don't think, I think there's what, like 27 positions open. It'd be great if we hired 27. We're probably not going to, so some of it comes from there, some of it comes from other programs.
That number, that 243, was based on a conversation that started with, what's the dollar amount tied to open positions?
It's like $800,000.
880K, right? It was at that amount. And that's where the conversation started and where we got to a place. I remember the conversation we had about, Mr. Taylor said, the goal is to try to fill all of those. We probably are not going to be able to do that, and I think that's what led us to the number that we got to.
So again, the ask is, it comes from DRA, it comes from the MS-27, which, we create and which is posted, and on it is Budget Committee appropriations. And it's not just one number, it's a line. If you want me to kind of carve it out, and we'll have the same probably for the school board as Budget Committee, that's fine as well. So I wanted to provide just the opportunity for the Budget Committee if they wanted to weigh in on that.
Mr. Chair,
Because
might
it's
want to
gonna
wait
go.
for Mr. Taylor. He's the one who made the motion, cut to 243. Maybe he had an idea of where he wanted to cut from.
I think it was just standard.
I'm comfortable with that because it was his motion, and I agree to give him the opportunity to provide his thoughts on it. Are you okay with that if we
I'm fine,
defer?
Yep.
So-
6 other budget committee members voted in favor for it, so what were your thoughts?
We just talked about them.
My thought was,
Just trying to put you
my
on point
thought
here,
was, my thought was bonus pools and.
I mean, if we want to consider open positions, I'll make another motion to reduce the bonuses out. Like, it's entirely up to you how you'd like to proceed. I'm comfortable taking both.
Well,
Quite frankly, I think this budget is incredibly inflated.
we do
So
still have
I'm
an
happy to
opportunity
go for
make
both,
motions.
I'm happy to
Go
take
ahead and
both
make a
parts.
motion. It's your,
Or,
this is your
or we
show.
can say bottom line's fine enough for now and revisit, because I have heard the complaints about current tax bills and concern for future ones, and I think we're being a little tone deaf with our budget. So right now,
3.5% is very modest at this point.
and we'll have to have an analysis from the town as to how our delinquent taxes are coming,
So-
because they were due.
A couple weeks
A
ago.
week ago. So I comfortable deferring this conversation until Mr. Taylor's here, since it was his motion.
I agree.
With that, any additional motions for this evening from any of the departments or any of the schools?
Not currently. I just know that I don't like it. So I'd be curious to see where it compares to the default, to see how much I don't like it. Do I really want to spend the time to try to find it, or do I just vote directly for the default?
So-
I can just call it a day.
If seeing none, then, what I will say is, actually, I want to I had mentioned adding in the calendar as a conversation. I think this segues into this right now, and especially while the two of you are here. So we currently have our next, take a step back. Currently, based on the calendar we have that was agreed upon by the town and the school and the budget, this was the end of our official school voting. We obviously have the opportunity to revisit between now and deliberative anything that we would want. Our next meeting is Thursday, the 14th, which is currently scheduled to only be currently the town warrant article presentations. I know we had a brief discussion last week about the school not presenting that evening because of the changes that were made. I had an opportunity to think about that and reflect a little bit more, and I think Mr. Barca had said it. I agree with the fact that based on some things that were out of the school's control, the land, cuts that we made that now potentially have to go to warrant articles, that giving them an extra week is fair. The town has had more time because we went through their budget first. So what I would propose, and I believe this was briefly discussed in a side conversation, is that at the December 20th meeting, which is when I believe you're planning on having your warrant articles essentially reviewed by the school board, and they have an opportunity to ask questions, is that correct?
Well, you watched last night's meeting?
Most of it, yes.
So, after our discussion last Thursday, I spent Friday creating a document called Extremely Drafty Warrant Articles.
I heard drafty, yeah.
I got that shared with the board, so that they were able to begin a conversation and give us some direction. That resulted in about 4 more questions at the end, which is fine. So we still have work to do, but there is at least an early draft out of that, and we'll continue to work on it.
And so those will be reviewed again at the December 20th meeting. Is that correct? Those warrant articles? Is that?
And we are in full day mediation on the 18th, so that's now a date that is set. So, hopefully that will be fruitful and we'll have some bearing on the 18th.
Yep.
But, there still are a lot of factors coming to bear.
So what I would propose for our calendar, and keep the meeting on the 14th, opportunity for the town to come in, present their warrant articles, and us ask questions. On the 20th, budget committee members who are in town and able to attend can attend the school board meeting, listen to and hopefully that's something that can maybe be moved closer to the top of the agenda for those that would join. Listen, and also have the opportunity to ask questions, just like we did over at the fire station with the budget. And then we would then vote on those warrant articles, both the town and the school, on January 4th, as we currently have scheduled. Essentially, what we'd be doing is taking the 14th meeting and splitting the town and school. And if you can attend the school board meeting, you attend it. If you have to watch it live stream or after the fact, you do that, and we use our Google document to capture questions.
Love it.
So that's and then that takes us to the January 4th. January 11th is the budget hearing scheduled. We've, Dr. Jenny and I exchanged some emails on that to confirm the date and time and location. We also emailed about a backup date in case weather becomes an issue, and really the only date that we are able to back into is that Tuesday, January 16th, which is the day after Martin Luther King Day. So we would put out that the budget hearing is scheduled for January 11th with a proposed backup date if we need it due to weather on January 16th. And that takes us kind of through the end of our budget season up until deliberatives.
Just on articles, while we're talking about warrant articles for a moment, right? One of the interesting ones for board. Go ahead.
Can I pause you for a second?
Yeah.
Can we come, because next I have general updates from the school, which I think might fit into what you're going to say.
Sure.
I just want to stay on the calendar and kind of
regarding
close the
the
loop on
timeline.
that.
There's a text among board members proposing to change the meeting from the 20th to the 21st.
I had asked Chair Ames to consider that. I don't know where that stands. I know
From what
Mr.
day to what day?
Mr. Plansky's in the audience. I don't know if that works, to change the meeting from the board meeting from the 20th to the 21st. They're not having a budget
We
meeting that week.
have no scheduled meeting that evening currently.
So we would have access, it's on the calendar though, so we would have access to this room, I would imagine,
Selectmen have a meeting on that night.
on the 21st.
Really?
Because it was open, yeah.
Okay, we'll have to figure that out.
We were scheduled for the 25th, so we moved it to that date because
Okay.
they were open.
Yeah, you told us
I
last week.
told you that, yeah.
Got it. So we'll
So,
continue, so
either
somewhere.
the 20th or the
21st,
21st.
somewhere in that window, we'll have that meeting and we'll do what we need to do. The other thing I wanted to say on the calendar is, and part of the reason I was, emailing with JD is that in order to bring a bond forward, you have to have a bond hearing, which is a separate, distinct meeting. And the proposal and what our council's advising is that we have the budget hearing that you run, and immediately when you adjourn, we commence a bond hearing. So we'll have the crowd already there. There shouldn't be a second night out to learn about this. The school will be discussed under our warrant Article 4, wherever it ends up on the warrant. But then we will have a separate conversation specifically about the funding and the bonding to
And that would be-
satisfy that.
That would be a school district meeting facilitated by the school board.
That's correct. So you will host your meeting, town, school, and then you'll adjourn that, and then the school board will immediately call to order the bond hearing. So we'll
I think
conduct
it-
that at the same spot. And that's part of the reason why a snow date is important, because the bond council has said we have to post a snow date. And a snow date, when you're talking the Thursday going into Martin Luther King weekend, is a challenge, so it really puts you back to that Tuesday. And that's the last legal date to do both activities, so.
Correct.
We need to get it,
So logistically,
Right.
so you have the hearing,
We do the budget hearing on the 11th at, I don't remember whether we confirmed the final time yet, 6 PM, 7 PM, whenever we set that. We do our normal budget hearing, we would adjourn probably within the hour, and then our meeting would end.
I anticipate you're gonna have to vote again.
It's possible,
So
and,
you'd have to
so
have
there
one-
could be some lag time in between people
Okay.
moving, that if we do have to, yeah, fair. As people are transitioning and moving and setting up and preparing 5-10 minutes, we might have to vote on something, yes, that's a true statement.
or you could wait till, the bond hearing should be relatively quick.
Or we
and
could
then
vote after the bond hearing.
Both bodies may want to revote.
I don't know, a budget committee vote going into the bond hearing might be interesting.
I appreciate leveraging one night.
No,
People
I'm
aren't
saying
having
the
to
vote from the budget committee on the bond might be interesting going into the bond hearing, that's all.
Voting on well,
Because there'll be a warrant article.
we would have already voted on that warrant article on January 4th at that point. Not that we couldn't revisit it on the 11th.
potentially,
or on
because-
February 10th, whenever the deliberative is, yes.
Because we'll email questions, not have much time to get answers and absorb before we have to vote, which is very reminiscent of a previous situation that ended badly. So I'm not comfortable saying I would vote on the 4th for a bond vote, so.
We could vote and then
Okay.
still re-vote if we wanted
Perfect.
to, yeah. Alright, so,
Is your vote really changing regardless of how many questions you have answered?
Just say no now.
I'm trying to keep an open mind. But I could be swayed.
is there any additional?
I said could.
Carrie, tell me how.
Only that it's cost
It's almost
effective and
8:30.
makes sense. Like, I'm not sold on the cost. I really am not. So
7 minutes.
make a solid argument as to how the taxpayer saves money.
Is there any additional discussion on the, I guess, proposed calendar changes?
I am traveling the 20th, so if I'm not there for that meeting, it's not due
it's
to
a
lack
ch-
of participation or interest.
It's a
Just letting you
change
know.
for us.
I'm
Duly
like,
noted.
A lackluster noted,
Just a
fair
quick
enough.
update on that. Mr. Brunel's tuned in, through the powers of TV. We have secured the community room at the fire station for 12/21
Thank you, John.
Yes.
For the school board
for
meeting.
the school board meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Brunel.
So
Maybe I
we
can
have 4 out of 5 members in agreement.
Yep.
You said yes, right?
Thank you, John.
Thanks, John. Okay, so the plan would be the 21st.
Well,
Budget
4 out of
committee
5.
members are able to attend in person over at the fire station. If you're traveling, if you're unable to attend for whatever reason, you can watch it. You can submit your questions via the Google Doc, just like we did during the budget process. Okay, everybody's good with the calendar. Great. Mr. Cutter,
One of the-
updates from the school.
One of the interesting warrant article discussions that occurred last night was the whole 2003, 2004 new position. How do we define a new position? Like, and the conversation amongst the board was, is this a good year? Is this an opportunity for us to put out a new article, right? I mean, let's see if the board can agree on what the language of that warrant article would be, and let's, pulse the town on some direction there. Mr. Shoemaker and I agreed to work together to put together an initial draft. We are exchanging emails on an initial draft, so we've already began to action that. And we'll report back to the board at our next meeting.
That would be an advisory warrant article.
It would be an advisory warrant article, but 20 years later,
To
right?
reaffirm the previous warrant article 20 years later.
Potentially.
Excellent. I like it.
Potentially.
Potentially.
Look, I watched the discussion.
It's
I
always a
appreciated it.
not a
I think clear definition, and I honestly think too, and I do not want to unpack this tonight, but I think for this group or whoever is a part of this group in the spring, to have a conversation and discussion, depending the outcome of this potential proposed warrant article, of what is our collective agreement on that? I think I heard the discussion on the school board. I have my thoughts. People have their own thoughts. I think just having a healthy discussion
Absolutely.
around that. I shared my thoughts that, I'm not going to unpack
Well,
that
it
now.
used to be a candidates question at candidates night.
Let's just start.
So,
Let's start
I
and see
think
what
it's-
happens, right?
I think I appreciate bringing the conversation back. 20 years later, the town has changed. There's more people here.
And those warrant articles, as we learned last night, were actually before no means no. So 20 years later, no means no is in place and in effect, loud and clear. Right?
Because of us, but yes.
Again, right, so let's see.
Any additional updates, Mr. Cutter, from the school?
I don't think so at this time.
Any questions for Mr. Cutter? I guess not related to budget or related to budget?
Not currently.
I watched the.
Just a comment on his no means no. It used to be a point in this town when no meant no. You didn't need a law to have it. If the voters said no, it was no.
Until we needed the Litchfield School
Yep.
Board to have a law.
Ms. Stevens?
So I made it a point to make sure that I
For what it's worth.
at least watched the facilities improvement
Yes.
meeting from yesterday. I just wanted to know, as far as like initial reactions, is that something that you'd want for me to send like as a resident to the facilities improvement? I think there's an email on the Reimagining
resident.
GMS site, or
Yeah.
did you want to start that conversation here, or I was just wondering what you
Well,
wanted to do.
now my interest is piqued, so now I wouldn't be.
I mean, is it budget related or is it building, like, the actual?
Warrant article cost related, I guess.
Okay.
Some of it.
Yeah. Like, well, there were just certain things, that were presented as possibilities into, the biggest thing was the idea to have a bathroom in every classroom.
Yeah.
For kindergarten through third grade. I have,
K through 2, I think it is.
oh, was it, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Two.
I heard that as well.
I just don't find that feasible because we don't have the custodians to clean
Maintenance
the
staff. I thought that.
6 bathrooms or so that we have. And budget, I'm just curious how much that may reduce the cost of the building. And I think that there are benefits to allowing the students to take a walk to the bathroom instead of being confined to one classroom the entire day.
And kindergarten's different, but.
Yes, yeah, I'd agree with that. But, and yeah, I think that was like the largest as far as cost of the article goes. That was one of my first reactions, and then,
I think the board needs to take a harder look at the numbers.
Okay.
I know we have very rough preliminary numbers at this point, and I'd like to get the double click into all that.
I think
that's
it's,
what I'm wondering, is it too early to open this conversation?
well, if it's too early, then it
Maybe, I
probably
mean, the
shouldn't
board
be on
hasn't
a
even talked
warrant.
about things like that. I mean, you also might
In their
notice,
process
we have this
of
brand new
proposing
building
warrant.
being proposed, right, and a fancy new design presented, right, but in the line items, there's no things like landscaping. Like, where does that fall? Are we not gonna put trees around the building?
No, that's in the site design.
Okay.
If you go to the top part, it's like $3 million for site development, so that would include the final landscape.
And that's why I wanna see like the double click into that instead of just a summary.
But it is in there. But I think this is excellent feedback for us to get at this point. The timeline that we laid out is, so facilities improvement meets on next Wednesday. And so comments that come to me will be shared with that committee if you want to send it to my attention.
Can we
Send it
leverage
to-
the Google Doc to put questions there? Is that fine? I mean,
Yeah,
I
great
consider it budget related.
Our
It's
shared one,
associated
yeah,
with the.
absolutely. If
with
you
the
put them there,
warrant
we'll make
article.
sure they go back to that group.
Okay.
And feedback like the bathrooms, I mean, there will be value engineering that is done, and the community will have to make choices. Do you want to do this? The principal made the comment that from a management point of view, he favors it. So it's his viewpoint on it. And so the community, again, will have to decide, are you willing to fund that? It is required for kindergarten, so it's something that was factored in, and it was a feature that was felt would be good to build into the building for everybody on the first floor.
Reality, that would, I mean, you're adding, what, 10 bathrooms essentially? Rough math, first and second grade, 5 classrooms, 10 bathrooms, maybe you're adding 8 bathrooms.
I mean, other line items in that budget were like paving, right? I mean, and I think the number was 440, top of my head, if I remember right. That seems incredibly low to me, right? Because you're paving, you need to create a new parking area for staff. Yeah, 2 loops, an access road around the perimeter.
What was it?
440,000, right? We also, are talking about correcting some of the paving area at LMS and the egress, like, I don't know what's included in that number. It seems a bit light.
I think,
Granted, I know there are very well-respected
Maybe that's they factored that in.
members in town that
Can we-
donate a lot.
Can we
But
have,
Kyle doesn't know that.
I know Brian has the drawings here. Could someone
I can
share that?
project them if you want. I mean,
Well,
what would you like?
I was just thinking, can we share them with the committee? So we make sure everybody has an opportunity to see it. I know it's on the, and I can, what I will do, if you share it with me, I will send an email to this group and say, here are the drawings, here's the meeting, the link to the meeting, so that everything's in one spot for them, and Kate will post it to the board.
I've already sent
We
that
talked
out.
about
I'm gonna forward you an email, so you'll have it in a minute.
You and I talked about that? What happened to a box?
The other,
Building a
No, it just
box.
looks like a mall.
Go ahead, Ms. Stevens,
I
go
had
ahead.
one more large question, I guess. Other things were just kind of smaller things.
No?
Is there a plan for when, or if things are delayed? Like it was mentioned that the paving would happen over the summer so that it went from, so the plan is, students, there's no disruption to the school year, right? So students are in the old building until the new building's finished, and the last step was the paving to the new building, because that would disrupt current school year, trying to pave through there. So if that paving is delayed for some reason, are the students still in the old building because there's no paving up to the new, like, I was just curious, like, what are the, you have your set plan, this is what I'm expecting, well, what are the backup plans if the paving can't happen until the fall?
So that
Things like
question
that.
is, we're not even there. So,
Okay.
this is all conceptual at this point. The phasing and the timeline of that would be something that would be developed further down the road. They're going to have to build an access road for trucks and construction that is separate from, I mean, can you imagine if we added that traffic into that site with pickup and everything else? So I would imagine one of the first things they'll do, if you look at the design, there's an exit road that would be added. The entryway is sort of using existing pathways through, but the exit would be completely new. It would be a little bit further down, or up the road, I guess. And so I would imagine they would build that first, and that would be like the construction access. So, again, they'll phase it all and make sure that they can.
And plans like these, are these things that other school districts would have planned out before a warrant goes before the voters, or is that something that is more in
I
the
think like a paving
design?
schedule, probably not, but I
you like
think
to
like
see
that level of
Can you just
detail
look
that you
at the
just shared,
agencies?
most,
That level of
numbers?
detail
There's
is
numbers.
really beyond. What
Those planning costs are included in the bond, is what you're saying?
Correct,
Okay.
and when you look at the budget, Kyle has a budget that he has developed, working with Bonnet Page and Stone. Bonnet Page and Stone are the construction manager for the project. They're doing a project with Kyle right now in Manchester, so they're up to date on current costs and expenses. And Keith, who is, I think he's president of the company, so he is weighing in on the numbers that Kyle should be putting on that sheet in order to factor it in. So all of that is live, current numbers with, there is an expectation of some inflation in the next 18 months that they've also built in.
we've, just as an FYI, in my head, I've moved us to the school facilities portion of our conversation because that's kind of where we are. And I do want to say I appreciate the discussion last night around going to RFP for the clerk of the works position. I think that was a good discussion. I think, I know it probably puts more work on you guys to do that and get that out, but I think it was the right thing to do. So I applaud the board for doing that and making sure we have making sure we have the best person, which I think the relationships show you're very comfortable with who's there now, but also making sure we have the best cost associated with that.
So it's the current, did we not have a clerk for this one?
Windy Hill was who they were proposing to use for that.
But we're going to RFP for that.
I thank you for that. Question on the, design contingency that you have, is that the contractor's contingency or the owner's contingency? 'Cause this came up with LMS once, I said, what is our contingency? They said, we'll cover it in the shortage.
$2 million.
So I wanna know, this contingency under number 6, is that the?
That's our contingency.
All right, so we look, okay.
Yeah, so we've asked Kyle multiple times, for multiple people, to make sure that everything's included. It was brought up on Wednesday that, you know, something's gonna have to be done with GMS. The understanding is that the 1930s building will stay, but what is gonna be done with other things is a community decision. So what was asked is, well, at the very least, 1930s building would stay, and then other things would be demolished. I'm not saying that's gonna happen, I'm just saying at the very least, that would be what would happen,
I
so.
think demolishing 1930s building would cause you a small riot,
Just
so
said
I
we
think.
weren't
We've repeatedly said we are not doing that.
So I'm saying, I applaud you for that decision,
Thank you.
because I don't think that
Yeah.
proposing to demolish it would go well.
But-
So
but
it's
Carrie-
It's a community school, it's a community spot, so community has spoken.
To that
Throw a
point,
stick of
there
dynamite
is
in that
nothing
thing,
in
just
the
let it go.
budget. There's nothing represented in that budget in terms of what to do with the 30s building.
But I
So-
do think Mr. Oblinus's point's relevant, right? That our numbers should include
Demolition.
disposal.
what we're going to do with the building.
Outside of the
Separate
1930s.
question, but the
But
point
that was
is
the
that
point I
when-
was getting to, too,
when we
though.
turn the 30s building over to the town or over to whatever the next use is, or if there's an identified school district need for the 30s building, there has to be an investment in that building. It's currently, we can't put people in it. It is going to have ongoing facility needs that need to be addressed, and so there has to be something done. So whatever the community comes up with, again.
But it's on school-owned land, right? So
That's correct.
it's school responsibility to keep the upkeep of that building, right?
Yep.
And also, like, currently the way it's set, and as I'm digesting some of the information presented last night, we have the new building being proposed, we have the current building being proposed, nothing being done with the current building, so it'll still effectively, in my mind, be there when the new school is operational, right? We have a responsibility to still heat that building, to make sure pipes don't freeze. So we're not removing all the energy costs unless we figure out what the plan is for that building.
Yeah, and we have time to figure out what the plan is. And what was asked of us is, at the very least, the plan would be to keep the 30s building and demolish. So can we get a cost for that?
Yeah.
And then since it's, although we call it a school, it's a community school. If the community wants to do more than that, then the community would need to kind of figure out what that is, and that would come with its own cost as well.
I think that gives you a good baseline to say, what would the cost be if we kept the 30s building and demolished everything else?
Yep.
And then from there, I heard a discussion last night, like if you decide to keep the gym, and it's something that is, obviously would have costs associated with it, ongoing costs, but now, in addition to talent, there's this community school gymnasium that can be used for whatever. Like, I think at least you would know what you would be able to come up from your demo cost from there.
Right, but there's also renovation costs if we do that, right?
Correct,
The
whether
town-
that's the school or the town or whoever, yeah, I don't know.
I can see it now, 50 years from now, we're gonna have an old school still sitting there and an old fire department just sitting there that we're heating for no reason.
But at least there was a warrant article, shall we get rid of the old fire department, and people voted no.
Fire department has great new siding. I would really like the Christmas lights, right? It's being used for cold storage,
Yep.
right? So,
So I think, do you
serves
think
a
you need to have part of the project cost as like
Doesn't U-Haul.
options A, B, and C? What do we do? If this passes, what do we do?
So, Andrew, when we had the community forum in September, there were two items on the agenda. It was to take, one more outreach to the community about the current GMS. But the second item was, and what feedback are we getting relative to the disposition of old GMS if the project passes? What did you hear from the community that night?
if I recall correctly, it's take it down and accept the 30s building.
So take it down, remove the foundation, backfill it, level it, put fields in. That's got a
grass it, done.
It's got a cost to it,
Yeah, it does, but
but we
that-
also, we're probably gonna keep the lot, right? Cause in case we need overflow parking, so now you're gonna have to extra.
Well, I mean, I would
paving
recommend
and-
the school district
and
keep the lot,
snow.
because in 100 years from now, when we need to build a new school,
Uh-huh, sure. So,
of us
our
will be here
snow
to debate that.
plowing and other stuff, so now it's not a net sum zero, you're not reducing it to zero. We're not trading one building for another. There's still gonna be costs associated with the existing
There
building,
is.
which is the whole purpose of the project to begin with.
Brian, anything else from school facilities you want to share from yesterday?
No, I think most of it's covered. I definitely would suggest everyone watch that meeting. It was pretty informative.
I did watch it today. It was very.
I'm gonna take, Dr. Jetty just sent me, materials, so what I will do is I'll pull together a new email that will take those drawings and sheets that he was shared. I'll include the link to the recording, so it's all in one spot. Kate said it's already posted on the portal. Anything else for school facilities? Capital improvement planning. Nothing's really changed since the last time we discussed.
Still
Ener-
waiting warrant articles, right?
Energy Committee, public hearing was held on December 4th. Any comments on, anybody watch that or attend that? We discussed the calendar. Public input. I'll reopen for public input. I will close public input, and before we adjourn, just a quick reminder, we will meet next Thursday, 7 p.m., and the topic that evening will be town warrant article presentations. Mr. Leary, would it be possible to get that prior to next Thursday, maybe early next week? I know Miss Kleiner's out this week, right?
Yeah, she's on vacation.
So perhaps early next week when she returns.
See what we can do.
Thank you. All right, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So made.
Second.
Motion second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstained. Motion carries 8-0-0. Have a great evening, everyone.
You know what the funny part is?